Legendary Marvel Comics co-creator and publisher Stan Lee has died. Christopher Martinez has more on his storied career.
Stan Lee was as recognizable to comic book fans as the superheroes he created: X-Men, the Hulk, and the Amazing Spider-Man.
I tried to keep them realistic, and I don't know of anybody more realistic than I am. So whatever little things worried me, I'd have Spider-Man worry about them too.
He also gave his characters real-life flaws.
The mere fact that he has superhuman power doesn't mean that he may not have acne, or he may not have trouble with his girlfriend, or get a sinus attack in the middle of a fight.
Lee took a job as an assistant at a comic publisher when he was 16 that eventually grew into Marvel Comics, and Lee rose to become its president. But in 1998, Marvel forced Lee out. He spent years in lawsuits with the company and Disney to get a share of profits from movies and TV shows based on his characters. Lee went on to start his own companies. He also joined forces with his longtime rivals at DC Comics, putting his own spin on their superheroes, including Batman and Wonder Woman. He was born Stanley Lieber, but signed his comics Stan Lee to protect his reputation.
I didn't want to be known by my regular name as a comic book writer, because it was embarrassing.
He thought he'd move on to more serious writing, but he ultimately embraced his alter ego, even changing his name and making frequent cameos in movies based on his characters.
I think you never outgrow your love for things that are that colorful or much bigger than life. Along comes superhero comics. They're really, I think, fairy tales for grown-ups.
Chris Martinez, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And GameSpot's editor-in-chief Randolph Ramsey joins me now by phone. Hi, Randolph. So great to have you join us. You know, we've seen an outpouring of tributes on social media from fans, young and old. What does that say about the influence and reach Lee had?
Thanks for that, Tanya. I think it really says that, Stan Lee's contribution to comics, and I think to why the culture in general really has been unprecedented. He's probably one of the best-known comic creators to have ever worked in the medium, and in his time since he actually created all those landmark characters in the 70s, he managed to stay quite visible in the public profile, and has been doing a lot of appearances in some of the biggest films, the Marvel films that have come out recently. No,
it is incredible, his energy to the very end. I'm curious how you think he was able to build Marvel into such a successful brand. Was it part of it his magical marriage of sort of the otherworldly, the larger than life, with the very mundane?
Yeah. I think that's the main thing that people credit Stan Lee for. Like before he came around, and really took over, the creative leadership of Marvel in the 1960s. Superheroes before that were larger than life figures. You had your Supermans and your Wonder Womans who were quite alien to most people. And along came Stan and made all of his characters very grounded. He created folks like Spider-Man and the X-Men, and you'd have them battling supervillains one minute and then trying to figure out how to, get enough money to pay for medicine the next. So, it made the characters really relatable, and I think really fit into that sort of counterculture of the 60s as well.
Yeah, that's true. We heard him saying in an interview there in Chris Martinez's package, which looked like it was from the 60s or 70s, that, just because Spider-Man could scale a wall doesn't mean he might not still have acne or have problems with his girlfriend. I think it was something was so interesting about that to the reader, to be able to relate to a superhero.
Exactly, and I think one of the key things he also did was set all of his characters in the real world. So, Spider-Man wasn't living in some metropolis or some other fictional city. He was living in New York. He was swinging through boroughs that people all recognized, and he was name-checking, things that ordinary people could see outside their windows. So, all of their characters were a lot more human and felt a lot more relatable.
How much did the times have to do with that? In other words, the era, the 70s, you think about the 70s, and you think about a crime-ridden metropolis. New York City was down and out. Places that appeared in the Marvel comics seemed very dangerous. And so I wonder if these characters had an even greater appeal because, as you said, they were set in real-world settings.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, Marvel at the time in the 60s and 70s, definitely took to heart. They tried to look at what was happening in the real world and actually try and address it within the pages of their comic books. And I think the most famous example of that with Stan, obviously, is with the X-Men, which were directly tackled with issues of equality during the 60s, when when that was one of the key things that America was grappling with at the time.
What an imagination and what an inspiration he was. Randolph Ramsey, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tanya.
And we'll be back after a quick break. Don't go away.